tribe. There's so much I want to share about this man, and I'm super excited to have this conversation about what potentially holds the keys to so much transformation for our generation and these incredible times of transformation on the planet. But before we dive in, depending on which workshop you've just come from, I wanted just to play a 4-minute video to give you one little insight into just one of David's creations. He's the co-founder of a festival, a New Year's Eve festival here in Guatemala called Cosmic Convergence. And I'll speak more about Cosmic, or I'll ask David to speak more about it. But I also wanted to give us some festival vibes. So really the invitation is to get up and move your body. And then we're gonna dive into this incredible topic. Okay, let me see if I can get together with the tech here. Dun, dun, dun. It's this one. Okay, is that the right button? This is the one. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. So welcome again, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a real honor to have you here, and hopefully just give you guys some more festival energy as we tune into a new way of doing festivals online. I hope you got your bodies moving. David and I met at one of these amazing Cosmic Convergence New Year's festivals, and I've spent many a New Year's sharing and celebrating on your creations, David. I want to let the people know a little bit more about you, and then we'll really dive in. But you graduated from UC Berkeley, so I know a little bit that you've been studying kind of the political economy of industrial societies for a while. But you obviously got drawn to the jungles of Central America because one of the major things that you've created is New Mundo, which is an incredible network of communities and impact hubs that are focused on building the new paradigm and living it, and regenerative, ecologically sustainable communities. I know right now that you are obviously particularly interested in bringing awareness to the new technology that blockchain is rapidly, drowning us with these new opportunities. So I might just pause there and hand it over to you, and perhaps ask you to share a little bit about your journey from Berkeley to the jungles of Central America.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share today, and thank you for hosting this beautiful event in the conditions that we find ourselves in, being mostly digital and virtual. And I'm actually less than 50 miles away from you, I think, as the crow flies, just outside Guatemala City, right nearby that lake where the video that we just watched. I've been coming back to this country, Guatemala, since I was 20, so 14 years. I was really attracted to here because of the vibrant indigenous culture and the nature and the ruins, temples, vestiges of another civilization that is still kind of pulsing here, even though it's in the past. It's also the energy is still here in Guatemala, and it's a really powerful land for dreaming, for manifestation, for creation. That's what I've found, and being here, like, through me, have birthed a number of things like the cosmic convergence. I won't say like it's mine, because it's a creation of so many people and so many energies, and it's like the fertile energy of this land that really gave it life. And it's also the creation of the local indigenous people that host it and do a large part of the production. And one of the things that drew me here is the traditional indigenous society that's more or less still connected to the natural world. And after university, I spent a few years here trying to immerse myself in like the original economy of humans and nature, like growing food and harvesting rainwater and learning how to purify it into something drinkable. These kinds of things. I won't say I'm an expert at any of those, but it was a piece of my education that I didn't get in the industrial world. And I was so, I guess, turned off by like the fascinated, but like darkly fascinated by the like study of how this industrial economic system works, how everything is geared around like extracting as much value from nature as possible, and essentially liquidating it and turning it into money, which I guess we'll talk about today. And in the end, money is it's an abstraction of value. It's not real value. It's like something that we ascribe, like it was created to exchange real value. And that's why money was created by humans. And now we've kind of forgotten that, and we treat money itself as having value, where it's really, and like we'll talk about cryptocurrency later, it's really just imaginary value, or what is the word? Like a consensus hallucination. Which, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I'm happy to share today, and also look forward to questions, and we've got time, so I'm here. Like, yeah, I'm excited for the next couple hours.
Thank you. So, I mean, I hope my role today is to be kind of, to revel in my naivety around this topic in some extent. I mean, I find within the ISTA sort of faculty, I'm kind of holding point in a way, sort of perceived to have some understanding of tech, and that's funny to me and somewhat worrying to me. So I'm really hoping that, I'm excited to bring your knowledge and wisdom to those of us in faculty and to the wider tribe. And so I want to start off right at the beginning, like, what is blockchain? I feel like most of us have heard of Bitcoin by now. We've heard of the word cryptocurrency, but the kind of underlining technology and why it's exciting is still a mystery for most of us. So would you willing to start that?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I like to think about it is it's a 22nd century technology that got dropped on the humans in the 21st century. And we have really no idea like what the potential of it is or how to use it. So the first thing we did with it is something pretty juvenile, which is to create money, which is something that, you know, we know how to do and we like to do. And it's kind of a reflection of where society is at today. And so the first kind of widely used application of blockchain is cryptocurrency, which is basically creating money mostly out of thin air and ascribing value to it. And there's been like a lot of hype around that. And I hope to like divert your attention away from what people call crypto and cryptocurrency, which is basically one application of blockchain. Just like e-commerce is one application of the internet. So when the internet was, you know, started to become more accessible in the mid 1990s, late 1990s, I don't think anyone had an idea of all of the potential ways back then, which is only like 20 years ago, of how the internet would be in use today. So today we're in like the mid to late 1990s of the evolution of blockchain. And there are more and more interesting use cases that people are starting to understand and put to use. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of speculation, just like there was with the internet back in the day. There's already been a bubble and a crash, just like there was, you know, with the internet in the turn of the century, the dot-com bubble. I think with the blockchain industry, there will be at least a couple more of those. And that's the nature of technology and hype cycles. But it really shows how much excitement there is around the world for this technology. And on the very simple level, a blockchain means a ledger of accounts, or like literally it's a chain of blocks. And what are blocks? Blocks are basically, you can imagine them like a fossil, and like a fossil records time and then like solidifies it, and there it is, like for everyone to see. And so a blockchain is like this fossil of history of all these things that happened. It's basically like a list of things that happened. And each block, like once it gets confirmed, once it becomes like part of the chain, it's there forever. And no one can tamper it, no one can alter it. It's basically this piece of history that is unalterable. And we can call it truth. It's like basically a consensus reality. It's like a list of things that happened that everyone agrees with, and no one can retroactively change it. And it seems like that's a simple thing, but it's actually really powerful. And it actually brings to possibility some things that as a human race we have not had access to before. And I think the most promising like underlying value of blockchain is truth and transparency. And ledgers and like lists of accounts, these are really old things, like in the Middle East in let's say the 7th century, when there was merchants trading horses and spices and whatever they traded. They would often keep a list of accounts, a list of trades in 2 cities, let's say Mecca and Medina. And they didn't want to bring gold back and forth between Mecca and Medina because it was really dangerous. They didn't want to get robbed. So instead, the gold moved hands from one merchant to another in Mecca, and then they recorded the transaction in Medina and in Mecca. So they have 2 lists. They have the list twice. And so it's decentralized in a sense because there's 2 of them. And now instead of 2, with a blockchain, there's thousands and thousands of copies of the same list. And that's why it's so difficult to change, because there are so many people around the world that are holding a copy of the list. These are called nodes, like nodes of a blockchain. And in order to change it, you need to like figure out how to talk to thousands and thousands of people and get them all to change the list on their computer, which is basically impossible. So that's the power of the blockchain is it's decentralized to the point where it's very difficult for any one person or company or government to control. Not impossible, as we'll talk about with China, but it's more difficult.
So this aspect of decentralization and the deeper level of security is what I'm kind of picking up on, that it's kind of that idea of kind of fraud, of people saying one thing and doing another is not possible on the blockchain. I know
Yeah.
we're gonna move away from currency, but I feel like because crypto is kind of the dominant use that we've explored collectively so far, are you willing to start there as well? And
Yeah,
just talk
totally.
about, let's starting with the positives. What is so revolutionary about cryptocurrency in juxtaposition to like our current banking system and fiat currency in your eyes?
Yeah, so one example I like to start with is WikiLeaks. So probably there are a number of fans of WikiLeaks on this call. And this is basically what people call censorship resistance. And this is back in 2011, before most people knew what Bitcoin was. And actually the creator of Bitcoin did not want this to happen because he or they or she thought that, so no one knows who created Bitcoin. It's an anonymous person or group of people, most likely a group of people. But anyway, so all of the governments in the world who WikiLeaks had bank accounts in those countries, let's say the United States, Germany, France, UK, Japan, whatever, they all agreed to close all of the bank accounts of WikiLeaks. So effectively, they cut off WikiLeaks from being able to accept donations. And they could do this because governments currently control the financial infrastructure. So then someone who's actually a friend of mine wrote to WikiLeaks and told them about Bitcoin and was like, you can take money from people with this new like money transmission network that's not controlled by any government. It's basically open source software that thousands of people are running copies of. Now, at this point, there's a node of the Bitcoin blockchain that's a satellite in outer space. So even if all the governments turned the internet off in all of the world, there would still be a node in space running the Bitcoin blockchain. So basically, WikiLeaks was able to start accepting donations again, and no government could stop it. And that was kind of the first time that a lot of people noticed what the power of blockchain was. And there was a term that I heard for the first time in reference to this incident called financial censorship resistance. So censorship resistance is like, you know, being able to speak freely. And we'll talk about blockchain-based social media in a bit, I think. But financial censorship resistance is basically being able to freely donate and contribute towards the causes you believe in without governments saying that you cannot do that. Of course, this is a double-edged sword because all sorts of drug trafficking organizations, child slavery, sex slave trafficking organizations, terrorist organizations also use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to evade government financial controls. So as with any powerful technology, it is a double-edged sword. So that's one of the kind of really interesting attributes of cryptocurrency. Today, it's starting to get more and more use as a means of exchange, like a way that people buy and sell things in countries that have failing financial systems or really high amounts of inflation and financial censorship. So Venezuela and Iran are two of the first countries in the world where Bitcoin is taking off as a currency and as a way to store value. It also is a way that people can protect their wealth from governments, not just in the sense of inflation and money printing, but a government has a really difficult time confiscating people's cryptocurrency because it doesn't, for the same reason, it doesn't control the financial infrastructure. And the Bitcoin blockchain is the first blockchain. So it was at the time a really interesting like feat in computer science. And there's two layers. The Bitcoin blockchain is a blockchain. It's a network of people that are running copies of the same list of transactions. And there, on top of that, there's a currency. There's only one currency. It's called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is basically the only currency that runs on the Bitcoin blockchain. Now they're starting to evolve it a little bit, but Bitcoin is basically a dinosaur blockchain and has like outdated things like mining, which we can talk about later as well. But most of the new blockchains don't use mining anymore and are much more energy efficient.
Can we just unpack that now, David? Because
sure.
it feels like
yeah.
it's right. So I know there was like this kind of euphoria of like the potential, and then there was, for many of us, hearing, oh God, but there's a huge environmental cost because in order for Bitcoin to kind of, maybe you need to unpack this mining idea. It's like it's costing a lot of electricity for these coins to be kind of mined, and that's not sustainable, and that doesn't align with our ecological visions of the new paradigm. So yeah, let's speak into that.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to finish the thought of the two layers, so you can imagine the Bitcoin blockchain like PayPal or Visa. It's like a network, it's a payment network. And then the currency Bitcoin, you can think of like the dollar or the euro, which is, you know, it's a currency, it's a unit of value. So basically the Bitcoin blockchain is a payment network that you can transact a currency called Bitcoin on. And in order to transact that currency, you need to pay transaction fees in Bitcoin to the miners. And the miners are the people that are basically securing the network. They're running the nodes. They're making the network really difficult for governments or corporations to take over. And the miners are incentivized by earning Bitcoin in order to run the infrastructure, which is not cheap infrastructure. It's like pretty fancy computer servers. And there's this kind of genius financial incentive. Like, how do you get a bunch of people to invest in computer infrastructure to help run this network? By giving them a currency that you just created out of thin air. And then the miners all have this story that the currency has value. And so they tell all their friends. And then that's the story of money. That's like how money gets created and has value. It's like a collective fiction. And that happened with Bitcoin, and it's continuing to happen. It's like a meme or a mind virus. I think of Bitcoin as a mind virus because it like gets installed in people's brains and then they think it has value and then it has value. And so, yeah, basically in order to run the Bitcoin blockchain, the higher the value of Bitcoin is, the more the incentive to run a node, which means that there's more people running nodes. There's more people trying to make money from supporting this network. And the way that it was designed originally, and I don't think the creator or creators imagined it getting this big ever, but the way it was designed is that it gets harder and harder to mine the Bitcoin. And again, mining Bitcoin just means running a node to help confirm transactions on the network. And each year it gets harder. And so more and more people invest more and more money in infrastructure, which basically the infrastructure solves complex algorithms for no reason. There's not really a reason other than what's called proof of work, which is proving that you have all the computer power to run the network. So there are other forms of proof and validation that are newer. Proof of work is like the first blockchains were built on proof of work, and obviously, like the more energy needed, the more energy consumed, the more fossil fuels burned. And so today, the Bitcoin blockchain is like, if you put it on the level of how much energy is consumed by each country, it would be like the 60th country, something like that. Yeah. So there are like other arguments that say, well, but the US dollar is like, backed by this huge military industrial complex that uses up way more energy. So in relation to that, Bitcoin's actually small. But really what the point I want to make is that the Bitcoin is running on an old version, an old kind of blockchain called proof of work. And there are thousands of newer blockchains that are much more energy efficient, and the technology is evolving very quickly. And, hopefully the main blockchain or blockchains that humans will decide to use in the future are ones that are energy efficient.
I guess instead it's like, as the initial exploration of this technology, there's a learning curve and there's advancements. So I know on the kind of practical, just kind of I'm going to try and keep bringing it down to a practical level. Like before, if I wanted to send a lot of money from like England to Guatemala, you'd either have to like go to the bank or wire it from one bank to another, exchange rate fees, the time it would take, or you'd have to go through a really highly expensive money transaction program. And I think in the last few years, we've seen new kind of banking technologies have to keep up. But I feel like that was in response to crypto, because basically within moments you could send unlimited amounts of money through cryptocurrencies to anyone.
Well, actually, so yeah, talking about money transfer, I think the first practical use of Bitcoin, not talking about like, ideological or idealistic ones, but very practical, solving a real issue, or I should say a real economic issue or financial issue for a lot of people, is remittances and moving money across the world. So the way I started with crypto was basically it was the graphic designer for Cosmic Convergence, and I had to pay her like $200 for some design work. And if I did a wire transfer from the States, it would have cost about $45. It would have taken 4 to 6 days, and they would have converted the dollars into quetzales, which costs about 2%. So all in all, we're talking 25% of the transaction, and takes almost a week. So that's kind of like snail mail or like physical mail, like you send a letter and then it gets to Guatemala like days later. Then someone was like, oh, you should just try using Bitcoin. So I did it, and it got to her in like 25 minutes, and it cost 25 cents. And then she converted it out to quetzales here in Guatemala. There's a vibrant network of money changers here. I found out that will change quetzales in Bitcoin for you. And there is like an existing similar kind of money network in many cities around the world where you can basically find people. There's a website called Local Bitcoins, where you can just find people and change local currency in and out of Bitcoin. Another thing that I want to talk about is fluctuation. So like Bitcoin, I don't think will become a currency that is used for day-to-day payments so much because of the fluctuation in value, and 25 minutes is still not fast enough for, like, you know, ordering food at a coffee shop and waiting for the transaction to confirm. But there are now things called stable coins, which are pegged one-to-one to currencies like the US dollar, the euro, the Chinese renminbi. And they're running on a newer blockchain called Ethereum, which has transaction times of a few seconds to a couple of minutes. And the fees are much, much less than Bitcoin usually, although Ethereum is really congested right now. There's a high amount of traffic right now. But basically there are now cryptocurrencies that are stable, one-to-one with the dollar, that are running on much faster blockchains than Bitcoin and much cheaper. And I think that's the real mainstream solution for, you know, everyday merchants. And that's that's exactly what China is implementing right now. They've just released their national blockchain, and they're light years ahead of the rest of the world in financial systems.
Maybe we'll circle back to currency, because I know there's just so, I know there's like, there's so much interest in like how to make money, because somebody made so much money in crypto. And I know we want to come back to kind of human greed and the kind of natural tendencies that can subvert technology. But I want to just start to open up the conversation to other areas of blockchain that excite you. And maybe, do you want to start with its impact on media and freedom of speech?
Yeah, so I think one of the promises of blockchain is censorship resistance, and the ability to give people a platform to create and to speak their minds without the possibility of censorship. So in that light, there are a number of blockchain-based social media networks existing, and even more launching. I think this year and next year will really be pivotal for blockchain-based social media. And essentially, what it means is that just like Bitcoin is like a list of transactions and wallets and everything, there's blockchains like Steemit is one of them, that are essentially like the blockchain is a list of posts like Twitter or Reddit or Instagram or whatever, where people can, just post whatever. And Steemit is a really interesting one, because I've noticed there are a number of people from countries like Venezuela and Burma or Myanmar, where there is heavy government censorship, and people can anonymously post on these platforms, and their posts are up there forever. Like they're on a blockchain, and they are like they're really, really difficult, if not impossible, to take down or to censor, because there's not even a company in most cases that a government can talk to and say, hey, can you please take that post down, or or we'll close your bank accounts, which they don't have because they're not a company.
Well, I think this topic is up so much at the moment, given the way social media and the kind of attention economy has kind of encouraged this pattern of, let's just say, using shock tactics to grab attention, and I feel like everyone's kind of shouting louder and louder. And there's a flip side of getting lost in echo chambers and only seeing, stuff that's similar to what you post. And then there's this place where journalists are actually kind of afraid to speak out, because yeah, they're getting slammed, or they're getting fired, or they're getting an intense kickback through social media. So there's this potential that we are kind of collectively about to decide to give up freedom of speech, or that debate is up, it feels. And so, yeah, I think it's really important that we become aware of alternative media streams. I mean, like, most of us are using Facebook hours a day. We're not paying to use it, and yet it's a company worth billions. So where is that value added? And it's that attention. So I'm definitely interested in the social media blockchain uses.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, talking about attention and value and the value created by social media platforms, which is arguably mostly us, the users, the consumers, the people that provide their attention, the people that make the posts, create most of the value that leads to the network effect that leads to billion-dollar valuations. And with blockchain-based social media networks, there's an interesting thing that most blockchains have a token or a currency that's native to the blockchain. They don't have to. There are corporate blockchains run by companies like IBM that don't have a token attached, but most blockchains use the token to both either raise money, because there is often not equity attached to a blockchain because it's open source software, it's not a company, and they instill governance rights into the token. So what blockchain-based social media networks are doing is distributing tokens to people who participate in the attention economy and the content creation. So you earn the tokens of the social media network by participating and by posting and by commenting on other people's posts and curating. And then that it's a token, which can mean anything. It has monetary value like a stock, but it also has governance rights. So you can vote in the future of the protocol. You can vote in the future of how the software is developed. And so that gives us, the users, much more of an ability to both participate in the growth of these social media platforms, as well as participate in the financial benefit that we're creating, or participate in the value that we're creating by being rewarded for participation. So I think it's a really interesting new model that can lead to network effects in a very powerful way.
So am I right in saying, like, it's almost like the reverse, like, whereas in Facebook, kind of, we're spending our time, we're giving our life first, we're giving our attention, and that has value because they're selling marketing to us, and then they're selling our data on. So instead of that model, when we post, we actually are receiving value, and instead of kind of them selling data on us, we are actually benefiting from the growth of the entire media platform.
Yeah, so basically, like, when in 2020, and this is accelerating rapidly, we are generating a trail of data throughout our lives with our laptops, with our phones, now more and more with, like, the Internet of Things. There's wearable devices that are tracking your heartbeat, and that data is going back to companies, and it's being analyzed and resold to other companies. Your credit cards, all of your financial transactions. So you're always basically generating data that has value that other people are collecting on. With blockchain, it's much more easy for the user to retain their own data, control it. There's a term called a data wallet that I'm hearing more and more, where you basically have your data and you can switch on what other people can access, if it's free, if they have to pay for accessing your data. So more and more we'll be able to control and monetize our own data, or not monetize it and keep it as private as we want to. I'm a really big proponent of universal basic income, or everyone on Earth having a very basic level of income that they can use to meet their needs. And one of the big things I see in blockchain is the ability for really billions of people around the world to actually receive the value of their data, of monetizing their own data. And even if it's $2, $3 a day, that's like basically enough for some families in this country anyway, to put food on the table. And it may not seem like much in the developed countries, but $2 a day is actually a life and death thing here. And so if you look at possibly the next Facebook, Facebook has like 2 billion users or something. What if each of those 2 billion users were getting $2 a day instead of all of it accumulating to Zuckerberg and a few venture capitalists?
Well, we had a chat earlier today, and it ended up taking us in all kinds of directions. And I want to kind of bring back that idea of like, most of the successful companies that we see in today's model is this extreme concentration of wealth. And you were breaking down kind of Uber to me, or Airbnb. And can you speak just a little bit more in what happens with those companies, and what's the potential with blockchain versions of those services?
Yeah. So normally the way a technology platform gets capitalized is through angel investors, venture capitalists, private equity firms, and the value is profit maximization, and that's like legally encoded into the U.S. Constitution, that companies have to maximize value for their shareholders, or they can get sued. So there's actually not much that companies can do about it. And because of this system, it's kind of already written in stone how these companies are going to end up. Like Google used to have a slogan that said, "Do no harm." And at some point in the last few years, they just removed it. So yeah, I think that because blockchain allows the community, or can allow the community to have essentially governance and control programmatically, like at the protocol level, at the code level. You can code in voting into the tokens, which allows the community to control the platform directly, and not the venture capitalists and not the founder. Like the founder of Bitcoin, people don't even know who it or they are. So, and that was intentional, and so like, I'm not saying that blockchain networks are not corruptible, because the Chinese government could buy all the tokens of whatever blockchain they wanted to control, and then just take it over. And actually that happened to Steemit, one of the blockchains that I mentioned earlier. It was there was a hostile takeover. So it can happen, but the mechanism of basically building governance, like democratic, decentralized governance on the code level, is something that basically enables us to create systems that are much more resistant to the takeover by venture capitalists. However, like, human beings are still profit driven and greed driven, even if we're not venture capitalists. So a lot of the early crypto projects took advantage of that. And I'm looking at some of the comments. Basically, some people saw their friends get really rich, lucky from Bitcoin, and then they wanted to find another cryptocurrency that would appreciate in value by 10,000x. And a lot of founders took advantage of that greed, and basically there were a lot of projects that were fully scams, that were fully there's like people in jail now for some of the projects, because they basically used the hype, used the growing awareness by people around the world about blockchain, used it to raise a lot of money for projects that either were never existed or didn't materialize, or were basically like promising to fly like fighter jets to the moon, where like blockchain today is like I said, the internet in the 90s. It's still slow, it's still basic, it's still like full of bugs. It's a very advanced social technology, because it allows us to do things that we've never been able to do before together. But it's not a very advanced, the technology itself is very basic and very early still. And a lot of people promised to build things that are basically still a decade or more away in the future, and raised a lot of money, and then, you know, still have the money or spent it or whatever.
And I feel there is that trepidation in kind of feeling safe to enter this like brand new territory. So yeah, one of the goals of this conversation is to support us to lean in and appreciate the potential. But yeah, there's for sure manipulation going on.
Yeah, and again, I really want to emphasize like separation between blockchain and cryptocurrency, because, and I have a friend that runs the one of the blockchain programs at IBM, and she's pretty convinced that like she's all in on blockchain as like, you know, the future of so many industries, but she doesn't think that blockchains need a token or a currency at all. So that is one legitimate view, and like I'll give one example. IBM is building really interesting supply chain blockchains, and this is a very like real 2020 non-crypto use case of blockchain, is basically tracing the supply of something, let's say pharmaceutical products. So in, you know, places like China and India, there's a lot of companies that make fake like medicine, and that often leads to deaths. So it's a real, like it's a real world issue, right? And blockchains you can create a supply chain tracing where, let's say at each point along the supply chain, there's a human validator or a machine or whatever that tests the purity of the medicine. And so you can see from point to point to point along the supply chain, you know, what time it arrived at, you know, point X in the port of Hong Kong, that it was tested, that it was still pure, it was still the same substance. And if there is a change in the composition of the medicine, they can trace it much more transparently than ever before. And again, transparency and truth are fundamental values of blockchains, and supply chains are a big thing. Like if you want to know where your coffee or fair trade quinoa is from, in the future, I think these supply chains will all be using blockchains, and you'll be able to see deeply into the supply chains behind what you're consuming.
Can you unpack for us a little bit about Ethereum and smart contracts? I know there's like a gazillion uses of Ethereum right now, but it's obviously kind of like the major alternative name that many of us have heard. And then I'd love to dive into regenerative communities.
Yay. Yeah, so Ethereum is for me the most practical, useful live blockchain today. I think that it's the only one that's really well, okay, in the last few months, a lot of things are changing, and I think blockchain is going to go into its second hype cycle in the next few weeks. The first one was in mid-2017, and this is 3 years later, and like I said, technology goes in hype cycles. But this one's based on real value and real blockchains that are doing real things. I don't think there's anything that is running at the scale of Ethereum right now. And Ethereum is like, if Bitcoin is 2D, Ethereum is 3D. Bitcoin was built to do one thing, which is transact a currency called Bitcoin. Ethereum is basically, there's not really much of a limit on what you can do on top of Ethereum. So I'll give an example, what you referred to, smart contracts. So this is basically encoding contracts. Let's say you get in an Uber and you basically enter what's called a smart contract with the driver. Neither of you are really aware of that, but you're basically depositing your money into a contract, and you and the driver are both consenting to the outcome. And there's a few variables. There's the time it takes the driver to get from point A to point B. There's the, the time he or she stops at the stoplights. There's the surge price. There's a few variables, what country you're in, et cetera. You don't know what the price is going to be, but at the end, you're both pre-agreeing to it, and that's encoded into a smart contract. So imagine if Uber were running on top of the Ethereum blockchain. So all Uber is actually a few APIs, application protocol interfaces, that some people got really rich out of. But you could run those same APIs on top of Ethereum. And what does that mean practically? It means that you and the driver can do a direct transaction. There's no middleman. There's no Uber. So the money is kept by the driver. There's not that 20% cut or whatever it is from Uber. Or everyone on Ethereum can make a agreement and encode it that 5% or 2% of each transaction gets distributed to all of the people running nodes of Ethereum. And basically, what I'm getting at is that we can have an Uber or an Airbnb or a PayPal or a Wells Fargo that's not a company, but it's an open source piece of code running on top of Ethereum. Or in other words, we can have a system that formerly required a middleman, and now we don't need the middleman anymore. And the reason we needed a middleman before, again, PayPal, Uber, Airbnb, is because we don't trust each other. And now we have this thing called a blockchain, which basically enables us to trust each other because there's code that no one can change. And that's very powerful. And I remember speaking to this pretty high level Airbnb guy, in their finance and fraud and cybersecurity department in 2016. And then 3 months later, he left Airbnb and just dove into blockchain because he's like, yeah, the Airbnb model relies on taking money from the middle of a transaction. And in the future, that business model may become obsolete. It may not, because Airbnb provides other forms of value like insurance and things like that there are still not alternatives for, but they're emerging. So yeah, basically that's what a smart contract is. And there are the second kind of hype or wave of blockchain, I think is going to be called DeFi, decentralized finance. And basically it allows, it's basically banking infrastructure without banks. So in your savings account, you can earn 0.1% interest. In a cryptocurrency decentralized lending system, you can lock your money into a smart contract. Other people can borrow it. They collateralize assets. They collateralize cryptocurrency. So they take a fully collateralized loan, so it's safe. Safe, of course, it can be hacked and there's all sorts of unknown risks. But people are earning 10% plus in their savings account. And that's because there's no banks in the middle.
Again, I know what it's bringing up for me is this place of so much of what we do in ISTA is kind of reclaiming our power. And there's so many ways in our current paradigm that we give our power away, or we assume we need some daddy figure, to make sure everything's some intermediary. And one of the major kind of core reasons this technology seems so powerful is perhaps as our consciousness evolves, we're actually capable. This technology is like an outpicturing of us trusting ourselves and actually peer-to-peer everything without getting taxed in the middle, and being able to all benefit from the services that we're using because we're co-owning them, rather than it being kind of owned by this small group of channeling all the funds right to the top. And what we've seen is trickle-down capitalism doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, like another way of thinking about blockchains is it's a form of digital commons. It's public infrastructure, just like highways, and it is owned by the public and controlled by the public. and it's a commons in a sense, because it's what's called permissionless. In other words, it's freely accessible to anyone around the world. And another thing that's happening is through blockchain networks, and again, primarily Ethereum right now, anyone around the world is having access to financial infrastructure for the first time. So here's another cool example. The United Nations did this with a refugee project in Syria. And I had a friend of mine working on this project. And basically, again, when a government controls the banking infrastructure, they can do whatever they want. They can take money out of people's accounts, et cetera. So I think what was happening was a lot of the aid getting sent to Syria, the government was just taking. And, we can call it corruption, we can call it authoritarian abuse of power, whatever. So basically what the UN did was they gave each person in the refugee camps an Ethereum wallet address, which is like your, PayPal or Venmo address. And and this sounds kind of like 1984, but they basically verified their wallet address with an iris scan, with an eye scan, like a retina scan. And in doing that, the United Nations created a bridge using the Ethereum network to move money directly to refugees, like right into their wallets, without the Syrian government being able to do anything about it. And that's really, I think it's a really cool use case of blockchain in the humanitarian sense. And actually another one that that is also relevant to Syria is that a number of refugees around the world, they lose their passports and they lose their identity when they leave a country. So actually my mom was a refugee in the 1960s and didn't have a country for a couple years, actually maybe 5 years. I'm not sure how many years, but she wasn't a citizen of any country. So in this day and age, there are many people around the world that are refugees, and for the first time, they can preserve their identity using a blockchain. So again, I think Ethereum is the main one doing this, where you can essentially, using similar ways like an iris scan to access your own data wallet, which basically holds your identity. People can identify themselves without a passport issued by their government. And this basically, like this guarantee of identity is something that it's another real use case that has nothing to do with cryptocurrency or money, that I think is a very beneficial one for people at the very bottom of the pyramid.
I'm gonna suggest we take a little break. We're gonna show another video, but I'm gonna invite you guys to get up and dance and move your body, because it's a lot of information and mind stimulation that we're all about, all levels of our being. So enjoy this next video. When we come back, we're gonna be kind of dropping much more into what David's passion is, which is really the community and environmental potential of this technology. So yeah, enjoy another little glimpse of where we are in Guatemala. Let's see if I can get the tech right my side. So yeah, real invitation to dance. Where am I? Here we go. Okay, everybody, hopefully gave us all a chance to move our body and refresh ourselves for more from David Casey on this topic. So now, yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit about how, so much for many of us, the current system, just to survive, we are often compromising our values, and that often goes to support systems that we don't even approve of. So I'd love to talk to your vision of an ecological society and what you're up to, particularly with Numundo.
Yeah, so Numundo is a project that I started about 6 years ago from here in Guatemala. It is a platform that anyone can access to travel and visit the global network of community spaces, eco-villages, retreat centers around the world. We have a presence in around 100 countries. You can think of it something like an Airbnb for the eco-village and intentional communities movement. I know probably a number of people on this call are familiar with places like Tamara, Angsbaka, Inanita. So there are other places like that around the world that you can visit. The dream and the vision that we started with, I have two other founders, one American and one Portuguese German. And the dream was to create a interconnected, unified network that people could basically step outside of this industrial capitalist reality of the cities and jump into building a different reality with different values. Ideally use alternative methods of value exchange other than money, barter networks, work trade. Woof was an inspiration for me. Couch surfing was an inspiration for me. So we incorporated some of those values, and we have a lot that we still want to do that we haven't realized yet. And one of those things is working with communities to create alternative currencies, alternative financing structures, and alternative forms of value that people can actually build equity in a community or build equity in a property by helping to build up that property and then enjoy the fruits of the value that they create. And we are I just launched a new project called Resource, and I'll put a link to it in the chat, which essentially allows communities to fundraise and actually pay employees, workers with a different form of value. We're calling them coupons. It's kind of a code word. But basically, we're allowing communities and properties and small businesses to issue coupons on the Ethereum blockchain and sell them to people or gift them to people or trade them to people or trade them with each other. And so finally that deeper vision of Numundo of creating an alternative value network of exchange, we're starting to realize, and we're using blockchain technology to do that.
So, on a practical level, I'm curious if you can give me an example, because I mean, obviously ISTA is a tribe of beings that have gone through, let's say, a week-long program and are connected through a shared experience. But we also have currently one sort of landed temple. It's its own community, the Haydn community in New Zealand, and that's a co-owned piece of property with massive impacts in the work that's being done there. So is there any way you could give us a tangible example of what that would look like potentially if that was part of the network or using blockchain to support a new model?
Yeah, so right now, because of the state of the world, I would say 70% plus of the communities and impact centers and spaces that we work with are closed to the public, which means that they have a sharp decrease in revenue, like many businesses around the world this year. So one of the use cases is crowdfunding. So basically, you can create a coupon, and you can think of it similar to Kickstarter, where you're selling room nights, and you give your community a discount. Room nights or tickets to a retreat or massage coupons, or you can use your imagination. You basically create a representation of value that you can that the person can redeem it for later, and you give them a discount because they're supporting supporting you right now during this time. And we had one business that we were working with raise $250,000 by pre-selling room nights. They are one of the prominent rainforest preservation NGOs in South America. And they basically crowdfunded from their community to renovate and rebuild their eco lodge. And so that's one way that that this new technology resource can be used. And resource was kind of it was a out branch of New Mundo, like an offshoot that we decided to create into a separate project. Another way that you can use it is to reward work traders with these pieces of value. So, unemployment in my country is at something like 14, 15%. I think probably similar in other countries around the world, some worse, some better. But there's a lot of people that, have a desire to own a little piece of land or own a stake in a cooperative. And so another use case that we have is people can build up equity by working, 3 months, 6 months, and then accumulate a certain amount of coupons, let's say like $10,000, $20,000 worth of coupons. And then they can trade that back into the property owner or the collective or the cooperative for a stake or a parcel or a share of the property. So that's another way that this kind of technology and feature set can be used. And it also works kind of like a gift card. You can transfer it, you can give it to a friend, you can swap it for other coupons from other businesses. And this is all running directly on top of Ethereum, which is really cool for all the other reasons we talked about earlier, because it means that you can like program the coupons, or you can program really cool things to happen, like voting actually. So here's another way. Let's say there's like 500 micro investors in the property in New Zealand. You can basically create a voting token where people can vote on the development of the temple and what materials to use and which designs and things like that. Or in the context of a festival, you could vote on which speakers people want and which topics people want to cover, basically by using a blockchain voting system.
So would that be kind of like based on like the amount of tokens that I have, my vote would be also kind of represented by that percentage and have that much sway?
So there are a number of ways to do it, and like getting into governance is one of the favorite thing of blockchain nerds. And I would say there's not a right way. The capitalist way is basically one token, one vote, or one share, one vote. And that is pretty vulnerable to takeover by capitalists, because whoever has the most money has the most votes. So that one can be dangerous. What you can do is you can cap the amount of votes someone has, like no matter how many tokens or shares you have, your vote, like you can only have so many votes, like you can only have 10 votes. But then, people can pay their friends to have their friends have the tokens and then vote by proxy through their friends. And so there's always, there's different ways to game the system. The most simple way and the most democratic way is like one token, one vote. which is, how democratic elections work in theory. One human, one vote. Not always in practice, but that's another way, like, that's like more cooperative style. And then you can have different classes of tokens or different classes of voting. You can have a board, you can have, group of architects that's specialized in one area where, if you're talking about building materials in New Zealand, it's not really maybe optimal for everyone to have a say. It's more like, these are the architects, each of them has one vote. And there's something else that is really interesting that is connected with blockchain called liquid democracy. And the way this works is that you can delegate your vote. So let's say each of us have one token, and we're going to vote on like who is the next speaker, right? Like who's the next speaker after this hour. And people trust you because you're an ISTA host. So many people delegate their votes to you. And then you're like, I'm going to pick David to go for another hour. And then all of a sudden people can undelegate their vote and like bring it back to them, and then shift it to someone else, for example. And that's called liquid democracy. And there are people experimenting with this system using blockchains and liquid democracy for voting. And I think there will be some cities in the next few years that implement something like this.
Wow, okay, that's boggling my mind. Yeah, I think governance, obviously we're in a US election year, so this issue is always up, but it's particularly up this year. And with so much polarization, it feels ripe to really give ourselves permission to dream new dreams around governance. Fascinating. Keep going if there's more. Otherwise, I want to.
I'll talk about one of my favorite economists, Charles Eisenstein, for a minute, that maybe some people are familiar with as well. And I think, for the record, he's pretty pessimistic about blockchain for some of the reasons that I mentioned, mainly that humans are still greed driven and will appropriate whatever technologies to maximize their profit. But basically, something that Charles talks about is like ecologically, like currencies and value systems based on regeneration and creating natural value rather than destroying it. Because the way it works today, you cut down a tree, you convert it into $1. That's the opposite incentive of regeneration and the flourishing of all life. And so what if we had a system where we flipped it and the incentive was to keep the tree? And if you cut down the tree, we think of the tree as the reserve. It's like the reserve bank, right? You cut down a tree, you have to pay $1 because you are destroying the reserve. You can't just destroy the reserve. And that's like, nature-based currencies and nature-based value. And, going back to Bitcoin and that money is a fiction and a collective hallucination, we can basically create a regenerative currency or an economic system that incentivizes regeneration rather than incentivizing the massive liquidation of nature. And enough of us can voluntarily participate in it that it becomes a thing, which is what happened to Bitcoin. So we can do it. Like, humans are already doing it with this one thing called Bitcoin. And so we can create a cryptocurrency that has, specific nature-based values. And I saw someone mention seeds. That is one that is also inspired by regeneration. And I think it's a really interesting project in its early phases. It seems to have some good community support. And that's one I'm definitely watching in terms of, digital currencies that have the value of regeneration at their core.
I'm glad to hear you mentioned seeds. It's actually come to San Marcos, if you don't know. And the sort of food security is such a big issue, I think probably for all of us soon enough, given the current situation. So access to seeds, or the right to free seeds. And there's so much happening right now. Can you give an example? I mean, I feel like one of the core conundrums of the human condition is access to energy.
Mm-hmm.
And like, maybe, is there anything around solar energy, or is there any?
Yeah. So, okay. So this is another super cool use of blockchain that I think I hope that energy networks will be running on in a decade from now. Okay, so there are, like I mentioned, blockchain networks are usually like there's an incentive to run a node, and that node is like basically, one part of the network that helps sustain it. And renewable energy networks are interesting because they're also decentralized, and they're also resilient to things like natural disasters, or like a network of renewable energy, like a distributed microgrid powered by renewable energy is really difficult to turn off. It's resilient to natural disasters. If the grid goes down in one area, the other areas can feed it because there's no centralized point at which it's producing. So you have the distributed microgrid powered by renewable energy. So that's like basically a bunch of people that are connected to an energy network and have solar panels or windmills or whatever, and they're all feeding into this energy network. And then you layer a blockchain on that. And basically you create an incentive. There's no energy company. There might be an energy cooperative that's helping to run the network. But basically you make an incentive for people to provide energy to the network. So now you have a network of incentivized individuals and small companies and cooperatives. And you can make a rule, you can say only renewable energy can plug into this blockchain. And then you basically feed the network, and you earn energy tokens for basically feeding the network. And that energy token is a currency. And it's not pegged to the dollar, it's pegged to 1 kilowatt or 1 kilowatt hour or whatever. And the people that have, that's real value. Like a currency that's pegged to renewable energy. And that's something that I think this is starting to happen. I was reading about a project in Spain. I'm not sure at what stage it's at, but distributed microgrid networks that are running on blockchains are super interesting things that basically I hope spread around the world.
Is that linked to the Internet of Value, or am I muddled?
Yeah, no, totally. So that's actually a term I've heard used to describe, it's another one that would have been good to mention at the beginning. Like people describe blockchain as the Internet of Value because it's a network of value that can interact with itself in a peer-to-peer way. So that's one way people describe blockchains, as the Internet of Value. And we can say that one manifestation of that is the production and consumption of energy, of renewable energy.
We're going to be opening it up for more questions, just to let you guys know in a little bit, but I want to give David a bit more space just to mention other projects that are interesting you, or maybe something that's not actually been created yet, but you feel is close, because I know you know many people working in the blockchain community to bring in these new ways of using this tech. So what's exciting you?
Yeah, another way, and this is very related to microgrids, renewable energy microgrids, is mesh networks. So mesh networks are another form of decentralized network. And if you guys haven't figured out yet, I'm super stoked on decentralized networks in general. So mesh networks are basically like it's a mesh, like a fabric of nodes where people are running basically internet like points, like Wi-Fi points. And there are a couple of these in the States. I think Oakland and Brooklyn, there are sizable mesh networks. And these things are super interesting because they're difficult for the government to shut off because they're controlled by a bunch of individuals. And they're also resilient in like, you know, if one node falls down, the rest keep operating. So it's a really cool form of censorship resistance. And I think that mesh networks hold a lot of promise, again, in countries that don't have free speech and don't have freedom of access today. And you can, again, combine it with a blockchain so that people are incentivized to run a node, which is basically like an internet node, a bandwidth node where you can like go and access bandwidth to the internet. And that person earns internet credits or internet tokens. And that, again, it's currency that's backed by internet bandwidth. And there are blockchain-based mesh networks starting to take off as well. And so like the future that I see is these kinds of networks, like peer-to-peer human networks for renewable energy, for internet, for these kind of things we think of as you know, things that humans should have universal access to, being built in ways that are rewarding the people who are actually creating the value. They're difficult for governments or corporations to censor or shut down or take over. And they're much more equitable in terms of the governance and you know, the democratic ability of human beings to come together and vote on upgrades and changes to the system. And I think it's a whole different thing than capitalism. It's like it's like the internet of value is like this commons that we can all participate in creating, and we can do it for, you know, financial networks, for energy networks, for whatever, and we have that power, and it really is only limited by our imagination.
Can you speak into what's happening with 3D printing mixed with this potential for really lowering the costs?
Sure, yeah. So this is another decentralized network or network of networks that's taking off, is the maker movement. So just like, you know, back in the day when computer printers were expensive and not everyone had one, today that's where we are with 3D printing. But the price is going down of 3D printers rapidly. The capabilities are going up rapidly. You know, I've seen houses printed in 24 hours. So like something else that I envision for the future of communities. And I'm talking with a friend about this right now and really excited, is having, so 3D printers are usually using open source models or open source blueprints. And there's a website called the Thingiverse. I'll type that one in. That basically is a bunch of 3D printing files that you can just download and print. So let's imagine a future where every village has a 3D printer, and there's, you know, these open systems where people can just download a bunch of files, whether it's free or you know, you pay a few cents or a couple dollars in crypto to download the file, and that goes directly to the creator. You know, whether or not it's in crypto, it doesn't really matter, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And then the only limiting factor is the material, the raw material for the 3D printing spool. And there are 3D printers that are using biological material now, like hempcrete, I think there's 3D printers. There are 3D printers that use recycled plastic. So basically like take an industrial waste stream and create 3D printing spool and plug it in and create, you know, things like, let's say composting toilets, because I think living in a house of recycled plastic has some health consequences that we may not be aware of yet, because the plastic gives off weird fumes and stuff. So you're not supposed to be sleeping, as far as I understand. But yeah, I think that 3D printing is another one of those technologies that is leans towards like decentralization and sovereignty and empowerment of the individual. So that's something that's super exciting and I think very relevant to the eco-village and communities movement.
Wow, so good. I want to, if you're willing, David, I want to open it up for some questions. I know we've had quite a few so far, so if any in particular grabbed your attention, but otherwise I want to open up to those of you listening. Is there anything we haven't touched on? Go for it.
Yeah, I'll just, like, there was a few questions and comments around crypto. And again, I'll emphasize that crypto is the first use of blockchain. I don't think it's the most exciting use. And it's been very abused by humans that are profit seeking and exploiting the greed of other humans because they're also greedy to take advantage of them. So that's happened a lot, and it's given the whole space a bad name. But that's why I really want to emphasize the separation of blockchain and the whole crypto scene. Blockchain is a technology like the internet. It's the internet of value. And crypto is one use case that has been, very much abused. I'll just put it that way.
Is there anything else you want to add on that theme of kind of like, yeah, the old system kind of recreating itself in the new technology?
Yeah, so like if we encode the same values of capitalist extraction into blockchains, then we're going to get the same thing, but on like hyper mutant, without government ability to regulate some of the things that we can regulate today, like child slavery, sex trafficking. So that's like any new technology, it's a double-edged sword. There's very recently China launched their own government blockchain, and they're providing cloud infrastructure to like a number of public blockchains, including Ethereum. And what that means is, and they're subsidizing it. And what that means is that the Chinese government could be in control of a large number of nodes of the Ethereum public blockchain in like 5 or 10 years. And that's kind of a nightmare scenario for a lot of people that care about freedom, privacy, and those kinds of values. So, there's always two sides, and it's a story that is like unfolding by the day at rapid rates, and it is not a story that is fully written, and we have the opportunity to write it, and that's really exciting and empowering.
Is there anything that can be done to stop that? I mean, China's obviously a big player.
Mark, can you elaborate, like, to stop what the kind of China's master plan for the future of the financial system? China taking over, yeah. Well, other governments have plenty of resources. I don't think most governments have woken up to to what blockchain really is, and the fact that it will change the world in ways like the internet has changed the world. And we could have never imagined how the internet would change the world 20, 30 years ago. And I don't think we can imagine how blockchain will change the world. And I think most governments don't really understand or haven't grappled with the consequences of the technology. So, and I have friends in the blockchain industry that are trying to lobby in Washington, and they say that these guys just don't understand it at all. They're like, still on email, like 70-year-old ranchers from Texas or whatever. And so yeah, educating, I guess educating our own governments and getting them involved is one way. I think that groups of humans, responsible corporations, nonprofits, organizing together collectively. The thing is that blockchains are commons that are created by all of us. So we can create alternatives, and they're like again, the story isn't written, and I don't think that the Chinese plan will fully come to fruition because the values are so different than the values of the blockchain community. But again, cheap subsidized infrastructure might be the value that most people are looking for, and then before everyone realizes it, like it's done. So I think awareness, education is a big thing. So then there's a question about investing. So that's like a really dangerous one. So I'm not a financial advisor and I can't recommend anything. I'm really excited about the future of the blockchain space. And I encourage people to educate themselves about what's happening. I will say most projects are scams, like someone mentioned earlier. The ones that are definitely not scams are Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those ones are here to stay for a while at least. They might be like Microsoft, they might be like Yahoo, they might be like Netscape, they might be like AOL. But those are big networks. They're well established. There's a lot of infrastructure built on top of both of those, and there's also I mentioned stable coins. So stable coins are government pegged currencies like US dollar, euro, Chinese currency pegged, even gold pegged currencies, gold pegged cryptocurrencies. And one thing that I think is really interesting that we can do now is take our money out of bank accounts, convert them into stable coins, and put them into interest bearing like peer-to-peer lending accounts that can earn something like 8 to 10% a year, which again is like 100 times better interest than a bank will give you. And that's pretty safe. It's like not fully safe because this stuff is not insured by the government. These are smart contracts that can be hacked. There have been hacks. Don't put anything into crypto that you can't afford to lose. But I think it's good to start playing with it, start getting familiar with the technology, because I think the world's financial system will be running on blockchains 5 years from now. And some of it already is, and people aren't even, like, it's totally invisible.
Yeah, I suppose that's the finer point, is like how safe are our banks? I know living in Guatemala, and having seen banks fail here.
Or like the head of the bank just like pieces out of the country with some suitcases on a private airplane. I think that's happened a couple times. Yeah, and then like there's plenty of countries around the world that are just printing money out of thin air right now, and I think we're going to start to see the consequences of that soon, in terms of inflation. Okay, so question, how do we support the ethical development of a new blockchain that shapes a liberating and joyous future? I appreciate how approachable you made this industry, but lasting and deep engagement probably won't be my groove. Okay, so how to support the ethical development of a new blockchain. So the one that comes to mind is Seeds. That's a really nice project. It's running on another blockchain called Telos. So it's not a blockchain itself, but it's it's in the blockchain space certainly, and they have a great community. Usually, a blockchain community has a Telegram channel. So Telegram is the main social media network thing that the blockchain community uses. It's pretty much like WhatsApp, except it's made by the Russian version of Mark Zuckerberg, who basically had a Russian Facebook lookalike before the government took it away from him. And Telegram was an internal company tool to communicate. So the Russian government couldn't monitor them. That's how Telegram started. So basically, people in blockchain are privacy obsessed. So they use this app called Telegram, and you can join the Telegram channel of a blockchain community like Seeds and just start talking and using their technology, giving them feedback. That's like seeing what they have going, learning about it, yes, you can invest in their token. You know, you can put $100 in and buy some seeds, and then you are definitely supporting them and supporting the network and supporting the idea of, you know, of that asset as money. Am I saying seeds? I'm not saying like, yeah, I'm saying, yeah, go learn about seeds. It's a really cool project. I'm not saying like, I know it's going to happen like in a financial level, but I think it is a ethical, I think it is an ethical blockchain project. Yes, seeds. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
maybe about 15 more minutes. I'm just curious if there's anything that's coming up for you, or just invitation from everyone listening to dive into your questions, and don't hold back. David, one thing that come up is if people are really new to blockchain, or is there any, or if they've got some experience, is there any kind of go-tos? I mean, we just spoken about seeds. Is there any other kind of suggestions you have for people that do want to lean in, and ways that they could get involved right now?
Yeah, so in terms of education, I think CoinDesk is a really good resource that's both news and educational, and seems pretty, I mean, they're very pro blockchain, but relatively like high quality, non-biased, truthful information, which, you know, a lot of the blockchain and crypto media is basically sponsored by companies trying to promote themselves. So, you know, don't believe everything you read. But yeah, that's a great resource. There is something that, you know, talking about the regenerative communities, something that we are building that's a very long-term vision for New Mundo, is to create a decentralized land trust. So we have this network of hundreds of property owners and communities around the world, and we want to build a way for landowners to contribute pieces of their land into a trust and then receive a token, which is basically a stake in the global land trust. Which there's something kind of similar to this in the financial world called a REIT, or a real estate investment trust. But what we would like to do is basically create this almost like decentralized country thing, where there are many properties around the world in trust that people can come and help develop and help build and help grow. You know, with things like permaculture and 3D printing and all the things we've been talking about, and earn the token that is the kind of like equity of this network of properties. So that's a vision that we're holding, that is combining blockchain and real estate and regenerative communities, and you know, massive community participation in building a different economic paradigm in the real world.
And I just want to underline, like, for those of you that obviously travel is not easily accessible in this now, but hopefully, again, in the future, you know, this, what I love about what you've created with New Mundo is you're also linking people that want to travel and learn the skills, or share their skills and have transformational experiences, and actually be matched up with those new emergent communities, but also kind of share the value within the community. So you gain points that can be shared in other impact systems. So you've really kind of, you're landing a whole transformational travel new paradigm. And for those of you that are linked to projects that may be interested in joining New Mundo, it's obviously the wider it gets, the more value we all have from being part of it.
Yeah, and part of the dream with New Mundo is kind of like a window into the, you know, the future that we could create collectively, and inviting people to step out of the current paradigm and into that one. And you know, the quote unquote new paradigm is fraught with problems and issues, and you know, unresolved shit that people bring, which, you know, if anyone's been to Tamara, I'm sure you guys have experienced some of that in Forum. And what we really want to create is this bridge, like this kind of portal that people can walk through, and rather than, you know, traveling and then going back, it's like traveling through portals and then going forward, and you know, gaining insights and learning skills, and then going and applying those skills to build more value in these new systems and on these properties. And basically, like, you know, there's many people around the world doing this, and we're just one member of the movement of how can we create viable economic ways for people to participate and build value in the new system, and have you know, be able to sustain themselves and in a very real way. And I think that that's my dream. That's what I'm working on. And for me, blockchain is a means to an end to that.
That makes my heart sing. I can feel that like uplifting and expansion in my heart. And I know so many of us are ready, and if we're not already, just yearning to live in alignment and to be of service and to bring our gifts in ways that honor this earth and support each other to live beautifully and together. And we have so much creative potential, and it does feel like a deeper awareness of blockchain and the decentralization that it offers, and kind of trusting ourselves, trusting each other more, and cutting out some of the middlemen and the way that takes up so much money and value away from those of us that are actually using whatever it is. It just feels like such a fundamental key. So I really want to thank you, David, for helping us unpack it more deeply and navigate what perhaps has been an oversimplification of just focusing on crypto. So thank you. I feel like you've offered us a great gift in dreaming into the possibilities. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, if anyone wants to write and ask questions or give feedback or whatever, feel free to write me. I'll write my email in the chat there. And yeah, if, you know, people are building communities or fundraising for community projects, then please talk to me, because we're on the same path.
Thank you all for your time, David. Thank you again. I know it's an unusual subject in the middle of a sort of more tantric focused festival, but I hope you guys got benefits from it. I'm going to invite David to join us back in the Facebook kind of the field, the kind of time to answer some questions there if it's a bit late here in Guatemala, but we're going to sign on off and yeah, share any final comments or any thoughts on how this has made you feel, or yeah, what's moving for you, having digested almost 2 hours of a lot of information and potentials. We'd love to hear from you. I invite you to move your body after this and get ready for more, because the ISTA Festival is 24/7 and we still got at least 2 more days. Thank you, Daniela, for being our tech support. Thank you. I see Makatu here, one of these festival point holders, making the whole thing happen. And yeah, it's such a wild, beautiful thing to be able to do this and see us all sitting in our individual little spaces. So happy festivaling, you guys.